How are you today? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Looks like it's about time to start our class this morning. Marlon's out of town, so you get me. I hope it's not too much of a disappointment. I know I'm not nearly as good looking as Marlon. I started to say to be back, but I don't know that I was ever as good looking as Marlon. So anyway, but we will be studying out of the scriptures today, and doesn't matter really who is up here talking about that. It's always a good study, and it's always a privilege for me to be able to stand before you guys and give you some things I've been thinking about. So today we are going to do, y'all know I like Old Testament and Old Testament history, and so we're going to do kind of a survey of the kingdom of Israel, the kings of Israel. Prior to the kings, we were in the period of the judges, which lasted 350, 400 years, which is about the same amount of time that the children of Israel spent in captivity in Egypt. So these 400-year blocks seem to kind of come along in my mind from the beginning of the kingdom of Israel, when the people addressed Samuel and said, "Oh, we don't like this judges thing. We want kings and be like everybody else. We want to have a king." So from the time that they had a king, that lasted about 400 years, is all that the earthly kingdom of Israel stood. It was about 400 years. I like to keep up with dates and a timeline. It just keeps things in order for me and helps me make it make sense. David, you put at about 1000 BC. Okay. Ray, you're alive today, best I can tell. It's 2025. How about 2000? Were you alive in 2000? Think so. How about 1960? You were alive in 1960. Okay, so when you pick a date and say, okay, 2000 for Ray, that's a good round number, 2000. Well, 2025. So when I give you these dates, it's not a specific, obviously there's a lifetime that went through that. So I always put David at about 1000 BC, just because it's a good round number to remember. So when we begin the kingdom of Israel, we got the first king is King Saul. Anybody remember what tribe King Saul was from? Pardon? Benjamin. Okay. Was there another guy named Saul from the tribe of Benjamin? Saul of Tarsus. Okay, well, we're not going there. But anyway, I just find that a little bit ironic that both of those Sauls were from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul did not stay as a king but 40 years, same as David, same as Solomon. So this consolidated kingdom of Israel was 140 years, 120 years, math, 40, 40, and 40. Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin, which was not the tribe that Jesus came through, right? All right, so God chose Saul. The people wanted a king. What did Saul look like? Man, he looked like a king, didn't he? He was a big old tall guy, good looking, handsome. So God says, okay, they want a king like everybody else. Let's give them a king like that. Okay, we'll give them a big, tall, good looking king. Okay? The Spirit of God fell on Saul. You remember that? Saul actually prophesied. The question was asked when they heard Saul prophesying, is he among the prophets? So we see how strong God supported Saul and stood behind him, even though in God's all-knowing knowledge, he knew Saul wasn't going to do right, wasn't going to stay there, because Jesus did not come through the lineage of Benjamin, did he? He did not. Now, the promise that God made that the kings will stay in your lineage didn't come to Saul. He didn't tell Saul that. Who did he tell that? Okay, he told David that. Who was king number 2? What did David look like? Was he a big, tall, strong-looking guy that, when Samuel went to Jesse to pick, Jesse brought all of his good-looking sons and told us, David, you just go keep the sheep, okay? You can't be you. So, this is where we get the line from God to don't look at a man's physical appearance. Look at his heart. And that's where God was looking. So this promise to David that no king, all of the kings will come through your lineage, it was true. All the way through the southern kingdom, even up to the lineage, to the birth of Christ, okay? Came through Judah, came through David. All right, king number 3, Solomon, also 40 years. 40, 40, and 40. Now then, Saul prophesied. He had Samuel hanging around. When David came along, Samuel was there for a while, but we also had Nathan and Gad and these other prophets that spoke to David and gave him advice and helped him through his trouble and helped steer him. Solomon, on the other hand, God spoke to Solomon directly 3 different times. We don't really read about any prophets that were helping Solomon. Wisest man, except for Jesus, that has ever lived. That's what the scriptures tell us. Wisest man that ever lived. Which gives me a little bit of hope, because Solomon did a bunch of stupid things. Makes me feel better, okay, all the stupid things that I do. There was no false god worship, little g God, that I could find during the period of Saul. Certainly not during the time of David. I assure you, David was not going to put up with any of that. Solomon, on the other hand, is where the children of Israel were introduced to Baal, to Molech, to Chemosh, to Ashtaroth, and Asheram, and all these other false gods coming from Solomon. So this kingship that the people wanted, that began the kingdom of Israel, was literally the beginning of the downfall of all of these people. So it was in God's all-knowing plan to bring us to Jesus. It shows us God's power over the devil and how God actually sometimes uses the devil, to perpetuate his kingdom and his goodness. What about Stephen? Okay? First martyr, devil came along. They stoned Stephen, killed him. What was the result of the stoning of Stephen? Christians scattered everywhere. Now they weren't just in Jerusalem. They were scattered everywhere. The seeds were planted like a dandelion. Okay? Saul, who was right there watching all of this business go down, an evil, evil guy killing Christians, murdering them, going all over the country. Did God use him? Yes, indeed. He used that sin, that temptation that Satan was putting on Saul to change him to Paul, to now he's got all of these Christians, all of these Israelites spread all over Galilee and Thessalonica and all of the places, Macedonia and all the places where he's fixing to go start preaching his sermon. So we see how God actually uses these things. The biggest one would be Jesus. Was it not Satan that was in the hearts of all of those Pharisees and the chief priests that actually had had Jesus murdered? Well, yeah. And what did God use that for? To give us all salvation. Okay? So we see God's all-knowing plan and how he does, how he's in control of everything. So after the three kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, we have the divided kingdom. Okay, so if we're putting David at about 1000 BC, the divided kingdom comes in around 930 BC. Okay? 930. It splits up. We got 19 kings in Israel. All of them did evil in the sight of God. Wasn't one decent king in the northern kingdom of Israel. God sent Elijah. He sent Elisha. Two of the most powerful prophets. Between the two of them, they performed like they recorded 24 miracles. And what's a miracle for? What was the purpose of miracles? To show that these people are from God. They're telling the truth. What they're saying, what they're doing is from God. It did no good. Israel would not listen. So God puts his plan into action that he's already put into place before the beginning of time. He's got it all planned out. So he puts it in place. He sends the prophet Amos and Hosea to these people around 750 BC. Hosea and Amos saying, hey, y'all aren't my people. Not anymore. Y'all aren't my people, and I'm not your God. You've turned your back on me. At the same time, around 750 BC, he sends Jonah to Nineveh to prepare the Assyrians to come in and wipe these guys out. All at 750 BC. Amos, Hosea, and he sends Jonah to Nineveh to get them ready. Well, it's only about 30 years later, in 721 BC, that the Assyrians came and took over the northern kingdom. It's gone. This was the beginning of God's plan for the Gentiles. A term, Gentile domination, that comes up several times through the scriptures. Okay? We're talking about around 280 years after we want a king like everybody else. That's how long that lasted. So what happens when our rulers or our leaders do not follow God? That was a problem with the northern kingdom. None of those kings followed after God. They worshipped false gods, and God put up with it as long as he could. Sent prophets, wouldn't listen. Done deal. I'm done. During the same time, Isaiah and Micah, around 750 BC, they prophesied to the northern kingdom, but also to the southern kingdom, saying, don't do like they have done. Don't be like them. Isaiah, the Messianic prophet, he speaks more prophecies of Jesus coming than any other prophet in the book. He's constantly telling them, look, Jesus is coming. The promise has been made through David, even through Solomon, through Rahab. Okay, the lineage of Jesus comes all the way down until we do get the king of the spiritual kingdom. Okay, so we got 19 kings in Israel, all did evil in the sight of God. We had 20 kings in Judah. 5 of them were good. 3 started out good, then turned evil. 1 was evil, and we think he probably turned good because when Manasseh, who was like one of the worst ever, probably had Isaiah sawed in two with a wooden saw. Isaiah. There's no documentation that that happened. However, in the book of Hebrews, we read that of the persecution that prophets went through, it says they were sawn asunder. So perhaps that's referring to this act. It's not in the scripture that says so. But when Manasseh was confronted and came to horrible circumstances, it said that he repented and turned to God. So he's qualified as the one who was evil and turned good. But we had 11 kings in the southern kingdom that were all evil. The last good king in the southern kingdom was King Josiah. He came to rule when he was about 8, and he's the one that found the Ark of the Covenant, found the book of the law, and had a great dedication back to the temple and pull the people back to God. Josiah was killed at the famous Battle of Carchemish when the Egyptians and the Assyrians got together to fight against the Babylonians. The Babylonians had started to turn into a great nation. They were moving south, and the Egyptians and the Assyrians said, we got to get together, man, and go up against these Babylonians. Otherwise, they're going to take over the world, which they did. They lost. The Babylonians were successful at the Battle of Carchemish, and King Josiah was killed in that battle. He had no business going out there, but he did, went out to help. He wanted to help the Babylonians, whatever, and an arrow got him, and they brought him back, and he was killed. Okay. So out of the 39 rulers, northern kingdom, southern kingdom, only 5 of these guys followed God completely. Okay, if you stumble across things that you say, wow, I didn't know that, but it's there. The 7th ruler in Judah, not Israel, but the 7th ruler in Judah was Queen Athaliah. Okay, we had a queen over the southern kingdom for 7 years. Where did Queen Athaliah come from? Anybody know who her mom and dad were? Ahab and Jezebel from the northern kingdom. Okay? How wild is that? How did she end up being queen in the southern kingdom? Well, I don't know what she did. Well, you can go back to Chronicles and read it for yourself. Hopefully it will spark a little bit of study. She had everybody killed that was in lineage for being king except Joash, little bitty baby. They snagged him, went and hid him, and when he was 7 years old, they brought him out and said, here's a king, lineage of David, all of these things, okay? So they killed Athaliah. He became king at 7, and the rest is history. All right, this is running around 712, 710 when Josiah and all of this stuff is going down, and this is bringing us to the end. It brings us up to 605, 596, 586. Those are the 3 times that Nebuchadnezzar came into Judah and destroyed the city. The earthly kingdom of the Jews was done and over with. There ain't any more earthly kingdom. That's what they've been looking for all the way up to the time of Jesus. Where's our king? Is it time you're going to come and be king and we're going to have our earthly kingdom? It's 600 years from, 400 years from there till Christ is born. They're still looking for this earthly kingdom. Well, let me tell you, folks, it is gone forever, has never returned. God shut that dude down. Jeremiah 15:1 is a good one to remember. Then the Lord said to me, this is Jeremiah, even if Moses and Samuel were to stand before me, my heart would not be with this people. Send them away from my presence and have them go. And it shall be when they say to you, where should we go? Then you tell them, this is what the Lord says. Those destined for death, to death. Those destined to the sword, to the sword. Those destined to famine, to famine. And those destined to captivity, for captivity, to captivity. That's where you go. You didn't turn to God. You could have. I've given you every chance that there has been. No go. So, here's where you go. You go to captivity. So, this thing lasted barely 400 years, after which they served the Babylonians, the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, then the Romans. It was the beginning of Gentile domination. And over 600 years later, the Jews are still looking for that earthly kingdom. When's our king going to come? Blind as they could be. They had kings. So, their statement about we want a king, God's going to give them a king. He gave them Saul. But he's going to give us all Jesus after this Gentile domination. Okay, so in 586, the temple was destroyed. That was Nebuchadnezzar's last trip into Jerusalem. Why are these people still hanging on? Why are they still down there trying to go to the Egyptians and get somebody to help them? I know what it is. It's that temple. Go down there and tear that thing down. Haul all of that stuff away. However, just out of curiosity, there is no mention of the Ark of the Covenant. Where was it? Well, it was in the temple. Nothing's really said about that. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that if I hurry up. Okay, so they go into Babylonian captivity. Babylon is first mentioned in the Bible in Genesis 10, verses 8 through 10, which names Nimrod, who is a grandson of Ham, Noah's son. Okay, he starts this city. We know about it by the Tower of Babel. Okay, you know, when they were going to build the tower all the way to heaven so they could see God and everything. They built and built and built, and God comes down there and changes everybody's language, where half of them are speaking Spanish and the other half Italian, but not really, but some other language. Okay, they couldn't communicate, so kind of hard to build anything. Where's Melvin? There he is over there. Kind of hard to build anything if you can't communicate with the people that are working with you. It doesn't work very well. So most biblical prophecies, and these are just some points of interest now. Most biblical prophecies referring to Babylon are in relation to God's captivity and God's revelations to Jeremiah, Ezekiel and Daniel concerning the end of the captivity and the end of Babylon. Now the most remarkable of this stuff are the prophecies of Isaiah, which were delivered a century before Babylon had risen to power, and there wasn't even any mention of Babylon. It was still in obscurity. So Isaiah chapters 13, 14, and 47 are absolutely astounding. That hundreds of years before any of this stuff happened, Isaiah is prophesying about it. The historic conquering of Babylon by the Medes and the Persians is mentioned specifically by Isaiah in chapter 13, 17 through 19. This is hundreds of years before it ever happened. Babylon is mentioned 260 times in Scripture, and is second in importance only to Jerusalem. Okay? 260 times. It is viewed as the devil's city, while Jerusalem is viewed as God's city. They're always seen in opposition to one another. Peter and John both refer to Babylon in the New Testament. Okay, now they're using it symbolically because Babylon's been gone for 400 or 500 years, probably 600 by the time Peter and John are writing. But because of Babylon's importance in the history of God's kingdom, it's still used as a symbol of destruction and of evil. So, look at Luke chapter 21, or I'll go there and look and read it to you. Luke chapter 21, verses 20 through 24. This is Jesus speaking. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is at hand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are in the midst of the city depart, and let none of those who are in the country enter the city. Because these are days of vengeance, in order that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Woe to those who are with child and those who have nursed babies in those days, for there will be great distress upon the land and wrath to this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword, and they will be led captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. So Jesus is even referring to this time of the Gentiles that starts with the Babylonian captivity. And it will continue to keep all descendants of David from sitting on the throne of Israel until Jesus sits on the spiritual kingdom. So historically we see three things about Babylon. It began as the place of man's rebellion of God with that Tower of Babel, okay? It's also a nation which seeks to take away the land of promise. Where's the land of promise? They came from Egypt and the promised land and milk and honey and all that stuff. Where did it go? Babylonians, okay? They took it. And it is the kingdom that destroys, or at least disrupts, God's kingdom here on earth and starts the time of the Gentile domination. You ready up there? We always think about, go to the one before that maybe. We always think about the people in all of those old times that they were very primitive and working with a stick and a string, and they didn't have anything going on. Amy and I were fortunate when we went to visit my sister one time, and if you ever get a chance to go to Europe, try to plan a trip to Berlin, Germany, because there is the Pergamon Museum. Molly says, oh great, y'all fly into Berlin and we'll get a chance to go to the Pergamon Museum and we can see the gates of Babylon. Well, I thought, well, okay, I guess we'll see these big old wrought iron gates, I guess. These are the gates to Babylon. Completely rebuilt by Hitler. And, I mean, these are the pieces. Go to the next one. Look at the size of that thing. Now, this is the entrance into the city of Babylon. Next. Yeah. Daniel in what? In the lion's den. So you see, this was their thing, lions. So we see the significance of Babylon and how great it actually was. Okay, this is going quicker than I thought. I should have brought those other two sheets. So, we mentioned the fact that there was no mention of the Ark of the Covenant. What happened to that? Where did it go? Well, it was God's presence, and it was in the temple, even as late as Josiah, which was maybe he got killed in 612, somewhere around there, so 615 BC, something like that. The Ark of the Covenant was in the temple. Well, the temple is destroyed. For centuries, debate, and this is not anything that has to do with our salvation. Romans tells us that these earlier things were written for our knowledge, and the more knowledge we have, the last thing that the Apostle Peter said to us was, grow in knowledge. Grow in knowledge. That's the last thing he said. Maybe he said that because of all the stupid things he did in his life. And he's saying, grow in knowledge in the Scriptures. So the Bible records that the ark was placed in the newly completed temple by King Solomon. That's in 1 Kings 8:6. But no reference is made to it after 586 when the temple was destroyed. Many assumed that it was carried off to Babylon with all the other treasures from the temple, among other theories concerning the whereabouts. Many Ethiopians claim that the ark was taken to Ethiopia by Menelik, the son of Solomon, by the queen of Sheba. Well, I don't know about that because Josiah had it in 615 BC, so there's no credibility to that claim that it went to Egypt, okay? Now, the Bible states that following the conquest of Jerusalem, Jeremiah was put under the care of Gedaliah, who was the new Babylonian governor of Judah. Not really a king, but we do know that Jeremiah and Habakkuk were the last two kings, the last two prophets to the southern kingdom. And I'm just wondering if I missed a page because I had that written somewhere. Jeremiah and Habakkuk were the last two prophets in the southern kingdom, okay? All those other guys, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Nehemiah, Esther, Ezra, all of that happened after the return from Babylonian captivity. So Jeremiah and Habakkuk were the last two kings. I keep calling them kings. They were kings, but mainly they were prophets. Okay? So Gedaliah was murdered by the Jewish resistance fighters who escaped to Egypt. They wanted to take Jeremiah with them to Egypt. He didn't want to go. He's saying, God's already told you don't go into captivity. It's going to last 70 years. It's going to last 70 years. So that's why I always like to start my music things on time, because why? You get to quit on time. Okay? So 70 years. Start it now, and it'll be over. The longer you put it off, the longer it's going to last. Okay? So 70 years. Go. Well, I think they ended up taking him into Egypt anyway against his will. A bunch of these Judeans who settled in Egypt are the Jewish kinsmen, which is referred to throughout secular history. The Elephantine Jews, if you ever read that term, those are the Jews that went to Egypt. It has nothing to do with an elephant, I don't think, but Elephantine. So there are books that were written during the 400 years of silence, we call it, when the Medes and Persians and the Greeks and the Romans and all of that's come into play, Malachi being the last writing prophet. But there were other books that were written by Jewish scholars. And we never look at those because they're not part of the Scripture, It's not part of the Bible, so we don't pay any attention to that stuff. Well, what about books written about the Civil War? They're not inspired by God, are they? But are they true? Well, to some degree. So you can't look at these books. I'm referring specifically to the books of the Maccabees, which were Jewish guys, Josiah and all of those people, Josephus and all of those people that wrote history, during that time. Well, no, it's not inspired Scripture, but they were historians. They didn't have any reason to start lying about stuff in history, especially at that point in time, maybe today. But anyway, these letters record that before Nebuchadnezzar sacked Jerusalem in 586, Jeremiah took the Ark of the Covenant and the tent of the Lord's presence, the tabernacle, and hid them in an unmarked cave on Mount Nebo. Now, this is the Maccabees saying this. That's what Jeremiah did. We don't have any real proof of that. This was the mountain, however, that God took Moses and said, okay, you can't go into the land of Canaan, but I'll take you up on this mountain. It's over here on the east side of the city, and you can look over and see all of this stuff. Deuteronomy 34, 1 through 6. That's where that happened, okay? So it's true. However, Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 22. It says, so the cherubim lifted up their wings. What was on either end of this Ark of the Covenant thing? Cherubims. So the cherubims lifted up their wings with the wheels beside them. And the glory of the God of Israel was high above them. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood on the mountain which is on the east side of the city. Now that's Ezekiel, and that is inspired scripture. Now, maybe not sure what that's all about, but we do know this. The presence of God was gone from the city of Jerusalem. That we do know. One of the saddest of the Psalms is 137. This psalm was not written by David. It was not written by Solomon. It was not written by Asaph or those other people that wrote psalms. This is a hymn written by the exiles in Babylon. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. Upon the willows in the midst of it we hung our harps. For there our captors demanded of us songs, and our tormentors mirth, saying, sing one of the songs about Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget their skill, and my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, against the sons of Edom, the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it to its very foundation. O daughter of Babylon, you devastated one, oh, how blessed will be the one who will repay you with recompense for which you have repaid us. There in Babylon, God isn't in Jerusalem. He's gone. The Spirit's gone. The temple is gone. The ark is gone wherever it went, maybe to a mountain, maybe not. I don't know. I can't imagine God allowing the Ark of the Covenant to be taken to Babylon. Even though the Philistines had it for a while, they didn't keep it long. They wanted to get rid of it too. So, a little bit of information about that. Okay.
Where was that you were just reading in Psalms?
I'm sorry?
Where was that you were just reading in Psalms?
137.
137.
Psalms 137. A song of distress. A hymn for the exiles in Babylon. So, Noah's Ark of the Covenant, we can call it. The term covenant is used 9 times when God is talking with Noah. He made a covenant with Noah, enough that he said the word 9 times. So, what was in that ark? The hope of all mankind, was it not? There's only 8 people left on the earth. So the hope of mankind was in Noah's ark. What did it represent? Well, it was an image of God's protection, his protecting hand on a few people of faith. What about Moses' Ark of the Covenant? What was in it? A memory of Moses, Aaron, and the law written on stone. What did it represent? God's protecting hand among the Israelites. So both of these arks have contained a symbol of God's protecting hand for his people. Now then, we mentioned Jeremiah 15:1, where God said, even if Moses and Samuel came before me. That's a pretty good recommendation, isn't it? If God's going to think of the two people that could have talked him into anything, he says Moses or Samuel. Boy, how would you like to have your name on that list? Well, it can be on that list in the book of life if we follow God. But an easy one to remember, if you can remember the number 31, Jeremiah 31:31. That's one to remember, guys. This is 600 BC, right before Nebuchadnezzar came for the last time. The temple was destroyed. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, crying for Jerusalem. The book of Lamentations is referred to as the weeping prophet. Broke his heart to see this happen. He tried all he could do. Jeremiah 31:31 says, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant. Now, we talked about the ark of Noah's Ark of the Covenant. We talked about Moses' Ark of the Covenant. Now we're talking about our Ark of the Covenant. Okay? The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Mention northern kingdom and southern kingdom. Really saying the whole of mankind. It is not like the covenant which I made with the fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them. We have that reference of husband and wife, just like the bride of Christ and all that stuff, and just like all the references to God saying that you people have been unfaithful to me, just like an unfaithful spouse. I was their husband. They broke that covenant, but this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and on their heart I will write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Exactly opposite of what Hosea told them, God said. You're not my people, and I'm not your God. That was the old covenant. Jeremiah says, we got a new one. And God says, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. That's the covenant that we have today. That's the ark that we're living in today. See, as far as God was concerned, the physical versus the spiritual was already in place. Micah 4 and 5 and 6. I don't want thousands of bulls sacrificed. I don't want rivers of oil. I don't need all that stuff. Does God need a bull? Does he need a goat? God don't need one of those. Does he need rivers of olive oil? He doesn't need all of that. What did he say he wanted? The heart. Love God, be fair with your fellow man. The two greatest commandments, according to Jesus. Love God, love your fellow man. That's what he was telling them all the time. And they just didn't get it. So, the physical versus the spiritual was already in place where God was concerned. God is always there. I love that song, The Unchanging Hand. It doesn't change. God's been the same from before time till now and to the end of time, even though there will be no end of time in eternity. God's always there. But as we see in the Old Testament, if you turn away from God, you receive your due reward. And that's a promise that God made. He cannot lie. According to Hebrews, after that comma in he cannot lie, it says it's impossible for him to lie. It's one thing to say, well, I can't do that. Well, it's another thing to say it's totally impossible for me to do that. If I can't do that, well, maybe I can. If I try hard enough. But if it's impossible, so God's not going to lie to us. Everyone's going to receive a reward. It just depends on what that reward is going to be. We have to hold to God's unchanging hand. Thanks for y'all's teaching this morning. I hope maybe some things were brought up that will spark some study or some things maybe that you had not thought of before. So let's take a break. We'll move on.
Sylvia.
Turn way back.
Can't you eat it down?
No, we've been